Well,
I'm not going to do anything to her.
I'm not scared. I'm going to look short next to you. So I just have a couple notes that I just want to speak from. First of all, I want to tell everyone how much we value the partnership with the Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We have been members for 20 years, so going back to 1997, if you're doing the math. We want to thank John Hernandez and his staff, especially for their hard work and their creativity in reinvigorating the Chamber. We're members of the Chamber because we believe deeply in the potential of Hispanic business in the Fort Worth community. We also believe deeply in the potential of Hispanics in business in the Fort Worth community. And to that note, I also want to recognize my colleagues from BNSF who are here today. They represent our Hispanic Leadership Council Business Resource Group. I had to memorize that. You did a pretty good job. Thank you. Thank you. Because at BNSF, diversity helps generate creativity, and inclusion embraces innovation. So I want to thank my colleagues for being here today and being part of this as well. Also want to thank Mayor Price. She has been a leader on issues which have long been critical to advancing prosperity and well-being of this community, of everybody in this community. She's helped to create a city which presents great opportunities for families to live a better life and to pass a better life on to generations in the future. I especially want to note our thanks, BNSF, to her commitment in education. The business community knows how hard she's been working, and I personally know her diligence, her hard work, her determination in recruiting people like our chairman, Matt Rose, to share not just their treasure, but their time and talent as acting as stewards for education here in Fort Worth and elevate education here in Fort Worth. So that's leadership, and I want to thank her for her leadership. So thank you.
Gracias, señora Costa, gracias por siempre ser parte de nuestro comercio y por siempre tratar de ayudarnos y por siempre ayudarnos. This is the best part of what I get to do today. I get to introduce two amazing leaders, two of them that happen to be personal friends of mine. I'm going to start with Carlos Apua. We have all these things that were given to me by John Hernandez, and I'm supposed to talk about all the great things he's done. He is a frog, or frogs. But more than anything, he's an amazing husband, and he's an amazing dad. I mean, you're not a dad, but you're an amazing son. You're not yet. We're working on that. We're working on that. But he's an amazing son. He is the founder of C's Cafe. Congratulations, you didn't know that. Let's hear it for Carlo Capua. Gracias.
My mom would have been thrilled to hear that announcement. There's nothing to announce. We make that painfully clear.
I am not in charge of delivering this news. No. Gracias, Carlos. Gracias por estar aquí y por siempre apoyarnos. Now, I need to introduce an amazing lady who really needs no introduction. She is, like I said, a personal friend. Mayor, you have always been supportive of everything that I do. I know that from the first time that I opened the doors to my restaurant, you have been there to support me, and I really, truly appreciate that. And because you always do, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Gabriel's doing great, and he has a girlfriend now, since it has some respect. So, please let us hear it from Mayor Betsy Price.
He's keeping it warm for me sitting on it.
Well, thank you to all of our elected officials, community advocates, and especially Mayor for your time today. You know, as I was preparing some brief remarks to open up the forum today, I was watching the news the past few days, and it's become painfully clear to me that the world that we live in today is very different than the world that I grew up in. We are in a very polarized time in our country, in our community. And there's so much anger and so much hate. You can probably see it on your social media feeds. You can see it on TV, where we have, for the better part of the past 2 years, we have complete strangers beating up each other because of the color of their skin, or because of the religion that they practice, or because of the candidate that they voted for, or the hat that they wear. And so, thinking locally, how can we reverse this trend? Well, it's through open conversations, dialogues like this with respect, with civility, and with dignity. It's very similar to the practice of the Chief Fitzgerald of the police department employs. He has a neighborhood police officer that is tasked with going into a specific neighborhood and building a relationship with that community. So when it comes time to have that crucial conversation, there is already a level of respect and a level of trust that makes it easier to have what is oftentimes a very uncomfortable conversation. And I think that's what we aim to do here. And so as we begin, it's important to lay a couple ground rules. I'll ask that if we express our opinions and perspectives, we do so with clarity rather than emotion, so that the goal is when everyone walks away from today, we feel our opinions have been heard, and more importantly, our opinions have been respected, because I think it's important to remember we live in a country where we can freely and openly express our opinions, and that can't be said for many places in our world. And more than just trying to change each other's minds, hopefully when we leave today, that you will all feel that you might be able to understand what it might be like to be the person with the differing opinion. And that person may understand a bit more what it might be like to walk a mile in your shoes. Because at the end of the day, compassion and empathy can move mountains, can't they? They can change what might be a shouting match into a dignified discussion that might move the ball down the field, even just a few inches. So I'd like to share a brief message to our Spanish-speaking friends right now that may be watching online or that might be here. Yo comprendo que hay muchas personas en esta comunidad, en nuestro Fort Worth, que están preocupadas y quienes están sentido racismo de primera mano. De hecho, también he sentido racismo cuando vivía en Japón por 4 años como extranjero, y Japón es uno de los países más cerrados del mundo. Y a través de esa experiencia fue súper difícil, pero aprendí 3 cosas muy importantes. Número 1 es aprendí que las personas tienen temor a lo que desconocen. También aprendí que es muy difícil enseñarle a alguien a tener empatía. Pero también aprendí que unos cuantos racistas mal educados no me convertirán en cínico. Eso es la clave. Y realmente creo que la mayoría de los líderes de nuestra ciudad son sinceros y quieren aprender a escuchar cómo estas leyes nos afectan. Y hoy es la primera vez que nuestra alcaldesa se presenta frente al grupo de personas con opiniones muy fuertes sobre unos asuntos bastante controversiales. Y hay muchos alcaldes en este país que evitarían estar en una situación similar. Por esto creo que una discusión abierta y respetuosa dará lugar a oportunidades para un mayor diálogo y una mejor comprensión, los cuales nos beneficia a todos. And essentially, the 3 points I'd like to share with that are that, in our community, people are scared. People are worried about what's going to happen with the current laws and how they might change. What's going to happen to their loved ones, what's going to happen to their careers, their homes, and their futures in this country. The second point is that many of us in this room have felt discriminated against at some point in our lives. And it's important not to let some uneducated fools who might make you feel less than worthy turn you into a cynic. Because what happens when you become cynical is you become apathetic and you start to lose hope in the due process of your community. You start to lose hope in your police force and your elected officials who are elected to represent you. And the third and final thing that I shared in Spanish is that you may send this invitation out for any mayor in our country to come and speak to a group of their constituents about a very heated topic, and most mayors would run for the hills. So we are fortunate to have a mayor that is here to tackle these issues head on and engage in relevant, meaningful conversation. And so I know you all didn't come here to hear me, you came here to hear the mayor. Perdón por mi español tan pobre, pero you can tell with my...
And I would rather hear you.
My non-native accent, that's right. So Mayor, let's get started, shall we?
First, let me say, there are so many leaders in this room that we should be taking lessons from so many. In fact, all of you are leaders in your own right. And I love these community talks where we have a chance to interview and talk. But I gotta say, Carlo is a real success story. He was already a leader in his own right, but he was in the very first class at Steer Fort Worth and has gone on to just do incredible things. And I have to think that that Young Leaders Group helped contribute to that, and you brought so much to the community. So, Carla, thank you.
Well, thank you. This was your idea. The Steer Fort Worth was your idea. You said you felt like you birthed us as your babies in that first generation.
Yes, and I knew that y'all were coming. So, like you, Gloria said you were a father.
Yeah. Things come full circle today, apparently. So, Mayor, today's topic is leadership and diversity. And, you know, as mayor and leader of this city, you wear many hats. You are part-time facilitator, part-time negotiator, spokesperson. You are the ambassador for our city when you go abroad and outside the city. What do you consider your most important job as mayor?
You know, it's really hard to classify one job that you do as mayor as the most important, because every job that you do as mayor is most important, whether you're at an elementary school reading to kids, or you're signing an event, as we were this morning for Will Rogers that will bring millions, or here talking to all of you. They're all incredibly important. You know, the goal for me is to leave Fort Worth a better place than I found it, which is Bob Bowen was one of my mentors, and that's what Bob Bowen always said. But I think you got to be an advocate for the city. That is really the most important piece, to be an advocate for the city and for the citizens. I always believe you don't govern well behind a desk, hence the fact that, you know, I get told I'm the Energizer Bunny and that, they hope it's contagious. And I always say, I think you think it wears you out. But that's okay. But, you know, really, I think you have to be out listening to your community. And I work 12 hours to 14 hours a day on average, and probably about 6 to 8 hours on Saturday. I don't do Sunday unless I just absolutely have to, although this Sunday I am working a bit. But the biggest challenge we have as mayors, all the mayors in all the major cities that I talk to, and including a lot of the smaller ones, has to be education. The one thing that keeps me up at night is worrying about education. And I'm not the superintendent, and I'm delighted that Ken is here to do that job, and is a great partner. But as a city, if we don't have great public education, then we are going to be dead in the water. The growth that we see in Fort Worth, the jobs that we see coming, the technical requirements that are here require a well-educated workforce. 65% of the jobs in the next 10 years will require a 2 to 4 year certification of holding. Dr. Giovannini knows that as well as anybody, that what TCC does is critical to the community, because oftentimes they can't get that done. But the statistics are, you mentioned earlier from BNSF on our initiative on reading, and we started Read Fort Worth nearly a year ago when we started looking at the data. And what I talk about Fort Worth's education applies just as much to all the major cities, with the exception of Austin. We started this earlier. But it's staggering. The key for children is, can they come out of 3rd grade reading on a 3rd grade level? Are they getting a start at birth, moving into toddler, pre-K and up, where they're ready to start school when they start kindergarten? Do they know their name? Do they know their letters? Are they comfortable with being in school? And when we started digging into the data, after we were told Fort Worth does not have the pipeline for the jobs that we need, and discovered that only 3 out of every 10 of our kids read at a 3rd grade level. And it's worse for the minority, the Hispanic and the African American community. If you look at those, only 1 out of every 10 in the African American community, and 1 out of every 1.5 in the Hispanic community read at a 3rd grade level. Without that ability to read, middle school math, which is the next benchmark, is impossible. And high school readiness for jobs is impossible. So we started Read Fort Worth, engage the business community, engage the school district, with the goal of getting all our kids reading at 3rd grade level. I'm very pleased about where we are on it, but truly, education has to be the backbone of everything we touch. It's the cycle that will break poverty. It's what will get better jobs brought to our city and keep the jobs that we have. It's what honestly helps reduce child abuse and child neglect. And for Chief Fitzgerald, it's what's going to drive crime down. the better educated populace is, the less crime we have. So it really has to be the single most important job that we tackle. And the city has to have a piece in that because, and so does the business community, because the schools can't do it alone.
Well, that's an important indicator, obviously, third grade literacy, and I hope that we can reserve this room for the year 2025, and the Hispanic Chamber can host a forum like this to share the results that we've had on literacy and how we've moved the needle under Dr. Scribner's leadership. You mentioned, Mayor, that you are very rarely behind a desk in your office, which I think very few of us have probably